In the second part of this podcast, we'll be speaking to Major General B.K. Sharma, the Deputy Director of the United Services Institution of Delhi, and with Brigadier Arun Sahgal, Executive Director of the Forum for Strategic Initiatives.
Given the likely US withdrawal from Afghanistan now in the immediate future, the prospects are very bleak. There is likely to be instability and some uncertainty regarding governance. What will be the implications for these developments on the strategic situation in the region?
In this kind of a scenario, the regional countries and the other big powers, everybody will get affected. First and foremost, this realization of South Asia, Central Asia connect in terms of TAPI and Chabahar, Ziranj, Dilaram axis. Its prognosis is very poor, and so is the prognosis of your north-south corridor. Second issue here is that I would say, to begin with, every country will try and hedge rather than getting into the fray of this cauldron in Afghanistan. I would say that Russians would probably like to sort of consolidate their position along the CIS southern belt and try and give some symbolic support to Taliban. Central Asian republics will by and large be aligned with the Russian interests there. As far as Iran is, my way of looking at it is that Iran will have a kind of a tactical adjustment to begin with, but long term they will keep their own options open should this not get degenerated in some kind of a Wahhabi crescent. So they will also actually keep a wait and watch kind of a policy. Pakistan would try and assume a lead role to begin with, because whichever new dispensation comes there, it would require overwhelming support from Pakistan. So to begin with, I think they will be a major player, but subsequently whether they are able to manage the infighting within different groups of Taliban and Islamic State of Khorasan province, I have my doubts. Sooner or later, I think the spillover effect of this violence is going to cross Durand line and affect Pakistan in one way or the other. But one thing is for certain, that in the initial period, they would like to unsettle Indian influence and Indian presence there. And that would be by virtue of certain well-engineered attacks against Indian assets there, or consulates and other things on the whole. So the period is going to be highly fluid, is going to be very uncertain, and one cannot actually make a very definitive statement which country is going to play what role.
Given the current assertive policies of India in relation to Kashmir and the impending developments of US withdrawal from Afghanistan, do you see Pakistan assuming a more aggressive and offensive role in Jammu and Kashmir?
Pakistan would recalibrate its strategy towards the whole state of Jammu and Kashmir. Presently, this sword of financial action task force is actually hanging on the head of Pakistanis, so they won't make any overt actions which will make them see as if they are perpetuating trans-border terrorism. Also, I don't think they will be in a hurry to migrate some of those India-centric terrorist groups who are operating in Afghanistan and direct towards India, because that is going to be a double-edged weapon. My way of looking at it is that Pakistan, while it will keep the pot boiling at certain level in J&K, but it would actually be more in the politico-diplomatic domain where they would be more assertive. For instance, now whatever protests and agitations are taking place in POK and elsewhere, These are under the banner of Azad Kashmir. The flag is not now Pakistan or an Islamist. So they are trying to portray the whole movement as if it is a nationalist, Kashmiri nationalist movement. And there is a little bit of a realization that this Islamization of this movement actually had impacted the international sympathy, and therefore I think this time over they will try and underplay this jihadi card as far as Kashmir is concerned.
What then are the implications for India?
See, we are very, very vulnerable there because we have 5 consulates and Pakistan has been very uncomfortable right from the beginning about our presence because they feel that we are using Afghanistan to foment trouble in Balochistan and other places. So the first thing would be somehow to tell whichever new dispensation is there to wind up some of India's overwhelming presence in Afghanistan and keep it only confined to Kabul. They could also orchestrate some sensational attacks against our people there, against our workers there. So that's another thing they will try and do. Third thing, I think they are going to tell new dispensation that you tone down the bilateral relations with India. For example, there are so many people who are coming for training, the ITEC programs, the military training programs, the number of projects. In lieu, they may actually come out with a package from Pakistani side supported by China to actually play a major role in the reconstruction and capacity building in Afghanistan at the cost of our presence and popularity there.
Given the realities of the potential withdrawal of the US from Afghanistan, what do you see as the geopolitical impact of this development in the larger Asia-Pacific scenario?
I'd like to point out 2-3 things. Point number one is that the American withdrawal, as we look at it, is going to be a 2-year long process, and it's not a process which is going to take place tomorrow morning. Even if he's given 6 to 8 months for the immediate withdrawal, the overall withdrawal period is going to be 2 years, and the 2 years, as we all know, is a long period in geopolitical space. The second thing is, yes, along with the American withdrawal, there are already surfacing some movements in regional movements. On Saturday, this coming Saturday, in 2 days from now, there is a meeting taking place between the Afghan, Iranian, Pakistanis and the Chinese in Islamabad on the future of the region. This is a process which has been started. There were 15-point agenda which was played out to ensure that there is a certain degree of harmony in relationship between Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan. This was an initiative by the Chinese. So I see that kind of scenario building up. I see the SCO getting involved over a period of time because SCO is directly concerned with it. And if you recollect the whole idea of collaboration by the Russians along with the Chinese into the Afghan imbroglio after a long period of time was based essentially on to prevent movement of drugs entering into the Central Asia and through that into this. As far as Americans are concerned, Americans going to have a problem. The American problem is going to be is that this is the last footprint of the United States in continental Asia. In fact, I will say continental Eurasia. Now, with the pullout from Afghanistan, there will be no American presence practically starting from Darwin to Diego Garcia. The problem for the Americans would be how will it manage the contradictions that emerge as a construct of this. So, are they going to willingly, given their current relationship with Iran, given their current relationship with China, given their current relationship with Russia, are they going to give up the space to the Chinese and the machinations of the Chinese, Pakistanis, and supported by the Iranians and Russians in their own interests? So, the reason you notice the Americans pushing us to play a bigger role in the region is primarily that they don't want India to unhinge itself from the region. So, there are a large scale geopolitical compulsions that might emerge, But this is a broad scenario that I see emerging.
What then is the game plan of China in all of this?
China wants to be a benevolent player in the region. It looks at the Afghanistan as a gateway to its Middle Eastern policy and its West Asia policy. Yesterday only it has signed a $250 billion deal with with the first right of recall. So basically what the Chinese want to do is that China believes that if it's going to have a future in the region, and if the future is based on petrochemicals, the future is based on oil, future is based on critical resources from Africa, then the West Asia and of course its markets in Europe, the West Asia becomes critical to the Chinese. So the Chinese wants to enhance their footprints, and also in Eurasia, as you are aware, that there is a certain degree of contradiction in terms between the Chinese interests and the Russian interests. The customs union, the Chinese are not very fond of. Chinese are not interested in it because it goes against the construct of the BRI. So what the Chinese are keen to strengthen their peripheral policy, or what they call the Western Zone Development Plan, and link this whole area in terms of geostrategic construct with their Indian Ocean policy, which we call the Look West policy. So they want to have a synergy between the continental and the Indian Ocean domain, joining the West Asia and the Indian Ocean right up to the east coast of Africa.
How then will this affect India, and what should India's response be?
See, in geopolitical terms, India has limited choices, as has been brought out by many players and many commentaries in the region. So, India is working on two plans. Plan A is to rebuild its relationship with Russia and continue the traction of the Eurasian aspect of its policy, and rework on with the Iranians and ensure that the North-South trade corridors, etc., remains relevant to its usage. The second element is to bring the Americans and push the Americans to have a much better understanding of India's interest in the Indian Ocean. The National Defense Authorization Act 2020 has explicitly asked, that is, the United States Senate has explicitly asked the Pentagon to draw out a plan for military exercises in Indian Ocean along with India, and has also asked for a relocation of a certain forces. The nature of those forces, etc., are under discussion, but they are all moving in. So there is an important movement. Along with that, India is working with the European Union, India is working with Japan to strengthen the presence of all these forces who are following the idea of free and open Indo-Pacific, to join hands together to create an architecture, that means EU, United States, India, and tomorrow Japan and Australia, to create a fairly secure security architecture that will help India and all the other nations to ensure that the rule of law and this area is not becoming a Chinese territory.
You've just heard two podcasts analyzing the situation in Afghanistan, one from a domestic perspective and the second from its implications for a wider region, both in its neighborhood and in the Indo-Pacific. Soon after, Donald Trump cancelled the summit at the USA, which was meant to address the situation in Afghanistan with the Afghan leadership as well as the Taliban in Camp David. With its calling off, the peace process too in Afghanistan ended, and we are back to square one. As situations develop in the future, we will revert to the question of Afghanistan subsequently.